Welcome to the Sales Beat podcast, where we explore sales intelligence in fast-moving consumer goods and how you can deliver against your sales goals. I am Veena Giridhar, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of SalesBeat, an AI-driven platform eliminating lost sales in fast-moving consumer goods sector due to understocking and overstocking. Last week, we looked at other consumer-friendly initiatives that brands can use to increase awareness, penetration, and repeat purchase. On today's podcast, we look at other strategies that FMCG companies can implement to survive and grow during these coming months. Given the primary driver of inflation today, supply chain constraints, the first on the agenda is to take stock of your existing supply chain. Assess your supply chain from end to end to understand your exposure to supply chain shocks. For example, if you are a snack company that uses pre-printed packaging, map out where the printing is done, where the packaging comes from, and where the material of the packaging comes from. Take a similar approach to the snack that is being packaged as well. If there is reliance on one supplier for any of the different components, assess other options for sourcing these components and act quickly to secure contracts with them. Also, now is not the time for just-in-time manufacturing and sourcing. Keep sufficient inventory of your raw materials. As a next step, map out the countries your raw materials come from. Make sure to include where your supplier is located based on the mapping exercise I described earlier. Assess these countries every other day for geopolitical developments. While assessing this, it is important to remember that we live in a very connected world now. There may be developments in countries halfway across the globe from where your supplier is. But if there is a close political alliance, or there are significant trade links, there will certainly be an impact. These days, geopolitical stability cannot be taken for granted. If it looks like there may be risks bubbling up in the countries you mapped out in your supply chain, start looking at alternatives immediately. Having a backup plan is paramount these days. Secondly, do the same exercise for your employees. Make sure your employees are happy and satisfied in their jobs as well. This is not applicable just to those in management roles, but also to those in your manufacturing locations and in your logistics team. Speak to your employees regularly to ensure they stay. If there are any asks from the team that require an investment, instead of looking at productivity returns, consider whether it is likely to boost morale. A happy employee is a productive employee. So indirectly, there is a higher return on investment than you would originally have calculated. Also, look at the opportunity cost of hiring employees and the time it takes from your team. Several companies are probably looking to cut expenses as well. While looking at which cost to cut or reduce, make sure that it does not directly impact revenues, morale, or productivity. Look at your cost much as a cash-strapped startup may. When spending on marketing, leverage data to reach your target consumer with a lot more precision at much lower cost. Take stock of existing processes and assess whether these are cost-effective or slow down growth. If they slow down growth, or if there are cost-effective alternatives, change it. While this may sound drastic to some of you, moving slowly is bound to be worse than acting fast. Be fast in your decision-making. We live in fast-changing times, and if companies are not agile in their decision-making and execution, they may miss opportunities or may be too late to react to adverse events. If you have teams in emerging markets, implement a similar process as they do. They follow a more agile approach than teams in mature markets. Things change so quickly in emerging markets that you risk missing opportunities if you maintain the same decision-making process as you do in mature markets. While on the subject of risk management, look towards those very same emerging market teams to understand the risk management process they have in place. They are constantly looking at and assessing geopolitical risks, trade risks, legal risks, people risks, supply chain risks, and even monetary policy risks. Look to those teams and implement a similar approach for your market or business unit as well. If you have any thoughts on initiatives that FMCG companies can adopt to survive the next year or so, leave a comment here if you're watching on YouTube, and we'll address them in a future episode. If you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify, email me on veena@salespeed.co with any questions. Thank you for listening.